Yeshe, welcome. And I'm delighted you can join us. All of us, it's morning where all of us are and evening where you are. And maybe just as a way to start out, I'll just flesh out a little of the background as I understand of how we got here. Originally, I think this session was set up by you and Shane when you first joined our Sangha. And it was actually at just about the last minute that that session that was originally scheduled had to be obviously canceled because you came down with the coronavirus. And yeah. I believe you are still, as far as I know, our only member who has gotten COVID-19. And I'm sure at some point in this session, we will talk a little bit about the pandemic and Buddhist practice, because that's a very rich practice. It's something we've been talking about back and forth for the last couple of months, and it would be very, very useful to get your perspective on it. But in preparing for that first session, we actually did another hangout to review some of your Dharma talks from your website, and we actually had a very interesting conversation, a lot of topics that came up. But in terms of a place to start, I think really the most helpful thing would be if you could tell us a little bit about your background, given that we don't really run into that many British Vajrayana teachers. And it would just be fascinating if you could sort of lay out for us a little bit about how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, certainly. So I was born in a Christian family. And we weren't that religious, but, you know, we used to have to go to Sunday school as children. So I used to go to Sunday school, and it made no sense to me at all. It just seemed to be like storytelling, and I didn't get it. Anyway, when I was about 8, I think it was, then they told my mother not to bring me to Sunday school anymore because I was too disruptive, because I was asking many questions. So my mother said, okay, if you don't want to do, you follow this, you have to follow something. So when I was about 19 years old, I started looking at other religions, but everyone led me to a God and belief, and I didn't like that. And then I found Buddhism, where there's, you know, there should be no God. And also it's about an inward journey, and it's about, you know, how you can help yourself to help other people. So it really spoke to me. So luckily where I lived in London, there were lots of meditation centers. So I started off studying in the Western Buddhist order because it was down the road from where I lived. So I learned meditation with them, 4 Noble Truths and 12 Links, you know, just the basic things. And when I'd finished all those courses, I said, now what? And they said, no, that's it now. And I thought to myself, oh no, I want more. So it's from then that I went to Tibetan Buddhism. So when I first went to Tibetan Buddhism, I loved it, all the puja and the ritual practice. It was like theatre. It was such a show. So I kept studying there, and I studied in 2 different places in London, and I went on retreats, and it was great. And actually at that point, then I loved all the dogma part of it and all the ceremonies and the funny hats and all that. For me, that was good then. So then I came, I thought it's time to, you know, take it seriously. So I came over to India, and I didn't know anybody, not one person in India. And I went to a monastery in Himachal Pradesh, and they wouldn't take me at that time. Anyway, I started working in teaching English in a Tibetan school during the day, and getting Dharma studies from a local monk, Kempo. And from there, and I said to him one day, I've always wanted to be a monk. And he said, and why don't you? And I said, oh no, because it's difficult. And he said, okay, come tomorrow. So anyway, I became a monk and studied. I went to Nepal in Jamgon Kongtrul Rinpoche's monastery there. He was only a little boy then. And I learned Buddhist philosophy. And when I started to learn Buddhist philosophy, then for me, I thought, oh yeah, this is really what Buddhism is all about, the philosophy side, not all the ceremonies and the blowing of horns and banging of drums. So I learned that, I learned Vajrayana practice. And when I came back to India, I came back to the monastery I was staying in India, and I started teaching basic Buddhist philosophy, but also meditation. But when I first came to the monastery, because it was there's two different types of monasteries in Tibetan Buddhism. There's the college types where they learn the philosophy and that, and then there's the ritual, and most of them are just ritual practice. So because it was ritual practice, they wasn't teaching meditation. But we lived in a place called Topema, which was the place where they tried to burn Guru Rinpoche. So many tourists would come there, and they would ask the monks, you know, how many hours a day do you meditate in that? And of course, they didn't meditate any hours of the day. So they were embarrassed by that. And they used to say to me, teach me. So I don't know if you know, but in Buddhism, you tend to ask the teacher 3 times. And on the third time, they will do it. So they did that. So they asked me, and I said, no, I can't do it. And they asked me again, no. And later on, they asked me again. I said, no. And they said, no, you can't say no. This is the third time. And I said, I wasn't playing that game. I was just telling you, no, I can't do it. And they said, please. So we were supposed to be, because, we weren't allowed to teach the meditation. So we were supposed to be doing an English conversation class. So we would lock the doors and everything, and we would actually do meditation. And one day, one of the monks forgot to lock the door, and the abbot came in, and we were all just sitting there in meditation. So I got a real rocketing for that. But later on, they allowed me to teach the meditation. So after being there for, I don't know, 7 years or something like that, I set up a charity in Chandigarh, which is in the Punjab. So everybody from the Himalayan region have to come to this city for medical treatment. But I saw when I came with a monk that there was nowhere for these people to go. They come from remote villages into this city. It was scary. It was really expensive. So I built a hostel, this is where I am now, in the grounds of this Buddhist temple. So I left the monastery for 2 years to come and set this up. But when I came here, then so many people came to me for teachings and to learn meditation. And after a couple of years, I have 2 meditation centers here. And so now I'm staying here. But because I had the opportunity to stay here, it gave me a chance to actually look deeper into the Buddhist philosophy and look at what Buddha actually taught. So I started to also study the Theravada, the early teachings of Buddha, because I don't know if you know, but when you study Tibetan Buddhism, it's a lot of commentary. It's what Nagarjuna thought or Chandrakirti thought or whatever. And Buddha is mentioned very little. So I really wanted to understand what Buddha said. So I started learning the Pali Canon. And so I can put the two together. And once I put the two together, then I completely turned away from teaching the Vajrayana practice. So I do a Vajrayana practice myself, but I never teach it. And also puja and ritual practice. I do my practice, but I never teach or go to any puja. I feel that what Buddha taught, and if you read the early teachings, there's nothing there. There's no puja there. So he never did any. So, we've added it on because we like it. And there is a benefit in doing it, but only if you understand it. I think if you go to a ritual monastery, and you'll see that they know exactly making the torma, they wear the costumes, they know how to blow the horns and bang the drums, but they don't know why. And really, if you don't know why, then you're not going to get any benefit from doing it. So, you know, the main part in these monasteries is that you learn Tibetan, then you memorize all all the scriptures, and then you repeat them as quick as you can. And there's tests. And we used to have to go around and listen, no, faster, faster, faster. And they were just like, blah, 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 like that. And the point I used to say to the abbot, then what are they getting out of this? And for me, you know, it's not changing their mind in any way. It's not making them have less suffering in their life. It's not building wisdom and compassion in them. So if it isn't any of that, then for me, I don't know what would be the benefit of doing it. A lot of the time you need to do these things because it brings in money, and you know you've got to feed the monks and pay for the monks, so I can understand, but really they should also teach the monk about, in every monastery, about what Buddha taught and about meditation. So now I'm slightly different from a lot of monks. I tend to teach a little bit more secular in my approach, just so it has a wider audience. It's not that I'm trying to deny Buddha or anything, but I just don't like all the dogma. And for me, I don't, if people want to learn the words of Buddha and they want to learn about meditation, they don't want to learn a new language and all these words that we use, bodhicitta and all these type of things, that they don't understand them. So really now I've moved a little bit away from the traditional type of Buddhism. And of course I've been trolled many times because of this. But for me, I think, you know, it's true to me, and it's true to the, you know, I teach all over the world now. And so it's true to many people. It speaks to many people. So I always feel if my teachings are not relevant to how you're living your life now, then they're not relevant. So that's my journey. Sorry, I spoke a bit too much.
No, that was very, very helpful, Yeshe. And, you know, it gives us so many directions to charge off on. I'll tell you, one of the big topics that came up when we did, I told you we did our hangout on some of your Dharma talks. We had a big discussion around the topic of Western Vajrayana. Okay. Mm. And by that, what I mean is there certainly are some schools or some aspects of Buddhism which have migrated fairly successfully, or certainly and in some fairly large scale, to the West. And you could say that there's actually a lot of Theravada. There actually is Western Theravada, primarily because there are a bunch of Western Theravada teachers who are well known and have a pretty big following. A lot of that IMS crowd. We did a hangout not that long ago with Joseph Goldstein and of course Jack Kornfield and that whole group, and some of the newer teachers too, like Daniel Ingram and Kenneth Folk, Lee Brasington, who's a good friend of Dharmachanics. We do a jhana retreat with him every year. And so a lot of that has become accessible to Westerners. Now, Western Theravada is different from how it's taught in Burma and Sri Lanka and all those areas, because there's a cultural difference. But there's enough similarity so that it's something that is being assimilated by more and more Western folks. Vajrayana, on the other hand, it has all these really potentially very attractive characteristics. One is it's vast. It has got, one of the beautiful things about the Tibetan folks is they didn't throw in anything. They brought all these different cultures and these different teachings together. And they didn't say, these ones are good, these ones are bad, so we'll throw these out. They kept everything. And they were able to keep it together in a way where things were included and transcended. So a lot of the seeming, you say, oh, there's a contradiction between you know, the way these folks taught it and the way these folks taught it. They found a way to do it, to incorporate it. And the other thing is that just the Tibetan, as a group, the Tibetans formed a culture where there was such a depth of spiritual practice. I mean, people that were, you talked about the, you know, the philosophy versus the ritual. There's a lot of rituals going on, but there was also a lot of people that were practicing very, very deeply. And, you know, as you know, in cultures, there's a threshold thing where if you get enough people together, you get sort of like an inflection point where a whole society can change. So all those things are attractive. On the other hand, there are these impediments. There's, you know, there's the whole language thing. And the language thing is not only an impediment in terms of just communicating it. You know, if you've ever gone to a traditional Tibetan retreat, and there are a lot of them you can go to in the West, in the United States, you know, you can go places where there's a Tibetan Lama, and they're wonderful events, but they're very inefficient because you have the double translation problem, where there's a translator. You ask a question, you ask it to the translator translates to the Lama and back. And not only does that mean it takes twice as long, but you're also always wondering, you know, yeah, the translator is good and capable. Did I really get the right answer? Did he really understand my question? Did I really get the right answer? And so, you know, this whole notion of how does it actually be? And then of course there's the other impediments is the guru relationship. You know, some people are going to be comfortable with that. Some Westerners are just not going to be as comfortable with that. All the cultural aspects of it, all the ceremonial aspects. So I would be interested in any of your thoughts about the ability to translate some of this. I mean, to me, one of the first steps is having Westerners like yourself who speak English and can connect with Westerners, understand the culture, to be able to be kind of a conduit for some of that, particularly for people who all of the cultural trappings, you know, it's wonderful for people. There are Westerners who love that, and that's fine, but it does really limit the potential market and ability for a lot of these very powerful Vajrayana teachings to be shared. And I'd just be interested in any of your thoughts about Vajrayana moving west and more students benefiting from it.
You see, the thing with Vajrayana, it's not something you can pick up and put down. It's not, you know, I come home from work and then I sit in a little room and I'll do an hour of Vajrayana practice and then I'll come out and carry on with my life, my normal life. Vajrayana isn't really like that. I mean, if you're really going to do Vajrayana, it has to be your life. But who has the time in the West to give everything up and just do Vajrayana? Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. It's quick, but it's not quick if you're only doing an hour a day, because it can't be, because you're not putting enough time into it. And Vajrayana isn't something that you have to imbibe it the whole time throughout your whole day. It's not something to come home to. So that is a problem when it comes to the West. And also, I think you're right, the people that really understand it may not understand the Western culture. You know, Tibetan culture and Western culture are so different. I mean, they're worlds apart. And you were mentioning that before there was many people in Tibet doing the practice. There were, but there's not so many now. I mean, you have a certain amount of monks and you have Rinpoches, but you know, even some of the Rinpoches are not doing the practice these days. The young tukus, they just want all the trappings. So even that side of it is lost. So I would say that for me, the problem with Vajrayana, you have to give up your life to do the Vajrayana practice. It's not coming home from work and maybe putting on, you know, your red and white shawl or something and doing the practice. You know, you're not going to get anything out of it. So for me, it's better then to do meditation, do mindfulness, understand Buddhist philosophy, cause and effect, attachment, impermanence, because those things you can put into your daily life and still work and have family and have responsibilities, and they fit nicely into it. Vajrayana doesn't fit nicely into that. Yeah, having a family, having responsibilities. You know, you can't pick it up and put it down. So I'd say for me, that is one of the major problems for Vajrayana. You know, many in Tibet, they used to go up the mountains and, you know, do their chud practice and everything. We don't have that in the West. You don't, I mean, some people could, but most people don't have the ability to do that. And it's not even just going on a retreat once or twice a year. Again, it's not enough, not for Vajrayana. So I think the more relevance is Buddhist philosophy, the Buddha Dharma, and meditation and mindfulness, doing a reflection practice. All of these things we can build into our daily life. So then we'll get something out of it. You're right, it'll probably be slow, but you know, it all depends how far you go and how much you understand and how much effort you put into it. It can also, you know, within a couple of years, completely change your life if you stick to the teachings. So I think that is the main problem with Vajrayana, that it's not a simple thing to do. It has to become the whole part of your life.
Yeah, thanks for that, Yeshe. Let's just open things up here and see what questions folks have, topics to discuss.
They're asleep.
Well,
all right, I'll be brave. I'll be brave. Hello, Yeshe.
Hello.
I've been following you for quite some time. And in fact, now I smiled when you said you started with the Friends of the Western Buddhist Order. So did I, because they were the easiest to go to. And I also moved on. I actually, because I've been following you for a long time, I'm really curious. It seems to me that you almost have two groups of people now. You have obviously the people that are now close to your I forgot what you called it, but hostel, where you are now. And also your sort of online followers. I'm leaving out your books for a minute, but your online followers. And I wonder, I suppose, I'm just curious about how you manage sort of doing both. What the differences are. That's actually what I'm really asking.
Yeah, I don't know if there is a difference really, because you know, the people that I teach here, you know, in India, they're Hindus and they're Sikhs. So they're also searching. So, and I think, you know, one of the great things about Buddhism is that you can keep your religion and you can then follow the Buddha path, because really it isn't a religion, it's a way of life. So you can follow that way of life and still keep your religion. So, I mean, that's what happens here. But I think the way that I teach online and the way I teach here, there's not a lot of difference really. I mean, language difference, things. When I'm teaching online, like I've just done a session today, then I feel free because it's English and everybody understands. And when I teach here, then I have to be more careful about the words I use. But apart from that, I don't think there's any difference really. For me, I've always thought that if I'm going to teach, it has to be my experience that I'm teaching. I hate teaching from a book. I mean, even, you know, if I've just taught before the 37 practices, but I taught it in my way. I didn't teach it in a traditional way. I never look back over people's commentaries. I want to do it and express it in my way. So I don't think online, offline, books, blogs, podcasts, I hope that they're all the same and that it's just me and giving my experience and the way I see things. I know a lot of the time that does seem to wind the traditional people up, and they do let me know that. But for me, it's okay that, you know, they have their tradition and it suits them. And there's so many people who follow them because of that. It's great. But I'm not that, and I don't want to pretend to be that. And so people who follow me, they follow me for different reasons, because it is more secular. It is more, you know, helpful, more relevant. So I'm not sure that there is a big difference.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. And I think that, you know, this debate about online, well, for example, we are an online Sangha.
Yeah.
And it's been as helpful, if not more helpful sometimes, than a traditional Sangha, where, as you say, you're often going to and attending, watching ceremonies and things like that you're not necessarily completely understanding as a Westerner. Yeah.
I remember when I was in London and we was going to these different centres, and the one thing that I saw clearly in all these centres were jealousy, pride, anger, you know, people getting into groups. And I think all the things that you were trying to work not to have, you could see in these Buddhist centres where they had their little cliques and, oh, we've been here years and we know the Lama well. So I think when you do online, it cuts out all of that. And also for me, because I'm Western, I don't like all these people bowing down to me and all that nonsense. I mean, it's just, here people touch your feet and you cannot stop that. So I've just, for me, I take it that they're touching the feet, but for the robes and not for me. So I don't get any pride from that. But I don't like people being sycophantic with me. It's just, you know, tell me what, speak to me normally, ask me any question. Don't treat me like a god. I'm not a god. I'm lucky. I've spent years studying and meditating, and I'm lucky for that reason, but there's no need to bow down. So I think the online Sangha totally takes that away. And that's a wonderful thing. So you can still respect people without, you know, being sycophantic about it all. So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
I'll give someone else a chance.
Yeshe, you mentioned practice as opposed to ceremonies, etc. And I don't know how familiar you are with Dharmachanics in the time that you've been with us, but you know, we're about 80 folks spread across the world, 6 different continents. The big focus is on practice. And the beauty of it is we've got people that do all kinds of practices. We have some people that have been practicing Vajrayana for 40 years. We have some people that have been doing decades of Theravada. We've got about 20 people that have been instructed in the jhanas. So we've got almost every kind of practice you can imagine. Some folks are secularists, some people are very traditional. And it would be very interesting if you could just share with us a little bit of your own practice and you know, what practices you found to be most helpful, and what you mentioned, you know, Vajrayana requires, you know, pretty much your whole life. Anything you could share with us about your practice would be very helpful and much appreciated.
So my practice has changed in a way. When we started to do Vajrayana, we had to pick a deity. So the deity was one that you were drawn to. So I had green Tara, because at that time I was drawn to green Tara. So mainly all my practices were around that. But of course, when we had different initiations, and you see, this is another thing. Recently, last week, Dalai Lama did Vajrayana initiation online. So you see, for me, that's a little bit of a worry, I think, because, you know, the strict rules that used to be there when I was taught Vajrayana, there are strict guidelines. And now when you start teaching it online, then who are you teaching it to? You don't know who you're teaching it to. You know, we used to have to go through, you know, jump through hoops to get to a certain point before we can have a Vajrayana practice or an initiation. Now, online, you don't know who's the other end. he can't see. He doesn't know how they're going to do that practice and that. So I mean, for me, that's a real worry when we start doing those practices like that online. But going back to my practice now, every morning I get up and I do pranayam, you know, the breathing pranayam, and I do meditation. Then I recite prayers. So I've picked out the ones that I like. So I've just got my list of different ones. My favorite one is the Heart Sutra, and most definitely I do that every day. I'm not a great one for Guru Yoga, because for me, I mean, I did my, you know, Nongdro practice. Yeah. So I did Nongdro twice and I enjoyed doing the practice. And the first time I was just counting because I was a Westerner. And I was just, you know, making sure that I was getting, every day I was doing 1,000 of this and 1,000. And I realized when I'd done it all, that the only thing I'd achieved was I could count. So then I went back and started again and didn't focus on the counting and focused on the practice. But from that, then I took certain things into my daily practice. So meditation is my main practice. And this is the one thing that works the most for me. So in the morning, I do my practice.
Meditation.
Sorry?
When you say meditation, what is it? Open awareness or stage generation or completion, or what kind of meditation?
Yeah. So what I usually do is I just do the breathing awareness, and then I just sit and work what's coming into my mind. Whatever comes up, I would look at that and sort through that. So not, I mean, what am I going to have for breakfast and things like that, but, you know, reoccurring things that I can work on. I mean, for me, that's worked over the years, that I've managed to break things down and get to the root of the problem. So I think, you know, most of the time we just look at the surface of the problems, and, you know, it's like having a weed grow in the garden. If you just cut it off, it's going to grow back. You need to get to the root of it. So I think doing meditation, analytical type meditation like that, really gets to the root of it, and you can pull it up and get it out. So that's the type of meditation I do. I mean, I've done Vipassana meditation and it's great, but, you know, it's not something I want to do every day. For me, I think that, personally speaking, Buddhism is about working on your mind. So whatever you're doing, it has to be benefiting your mind. And if it isn't, like you said, people have done Vajrayana for 40 years. So, you know, hopefully those people are stopping every now and again and seeing progress, because if after 40 years there's no progress, what are you doing? So I think that each and every one of us are different, and it's not right for any teacher just to say, here you are, you have to do this practice, because it may not suit them. So I like to, I mean, going back to the question about online, you cannot do that online unless it's a one-to-one. But when I'm dealing with people, you know, in a group, then I can pick out and they can slightly change their daily practice, slightly change what they do to suit the person. So for me, I do meditation in the morning and do the prayers. Then during the day, then I do as much mindfulness as I can, keep bringing myself back the whole time during the day. It's become a habit now, so it's easier to do. And at the end of the day, I do a reflection practice to look back. So it's constant learning. So even though I'm the teacher, I'm still learning. Of course I am. I don't know it all, and I still have work to do. So, you know, for me, that's my practice. It's not just like 1 hour in or 2 hours in the morning. My practice is the day, the meditation, the mindfulness, reflection. That's my practice. It's a whole day practice.
That's very, very helpful. And we have, are you familiar with Shinzen Young at all? Is that name?
Yeah, I've heard. I don't know much, but yes.
Shinzen is a sort of a favorite here. He's one of the Western teachers that has become very popular. He's mostly Zen background. but he's got a very, very successful mindfulness practice. He does these large online retreats. We had a hangout with him a few years ago, and one of the things that came out of that that's become very popular at Dharmachanics is the idea of what we call monasticizing the day. So none of us are monks, but we actually do have a bunch of folks that treat their lives as if they really were monks in the world. And they start out the day by saying, okay, here's all the things that I'm going to do. And how do I make the whole day practice? And how can I even take, maybe even at a job or business interactions, how can I practice, loving kindness, compassion, mindfulness? And it's really more than anything a mindset, because the truth is anything is potentially practiced if one has the inclination in that way, if one intends it. In fact, in some ways, those sort of at the coalface opportunities in the real world offer more transformative potential than necessarily sitting in a cave somewhere, because we're not in control of everything. And so I think many of us can appreciate what you described, and it was very helpful to get that breakdown by you. So thank you.
And sitting in a cave also has its own problems. Where you move from, it's cold and then it's hot and then there's snakes and things. So people have this romantic view that I'm a yogi, I'm going to sit in a cave, I'm going to be Miller Ripper. But that was then. This is now. If we had a cave, it would have to be central heated or have AC. It would have to have a nice comfortable bed. So I think, and also that people have this impression that they're going to pull themselves away from the world and sit in a cave. Okay, if you do that for a long period of time, of course you're not going to get angry. You're not going to have all these emotions because you're not facing anybody. So when you think you've worked on all these things and then now it's time to come out of the cave, and then you face the real world, and then up comes anger, up comes pride and jealousy. So I think that to be in the world and learning it that way is so much more beneficial. When you've got people shouting at you, then that's the time you're going to learn, how am I responding to that situation? And did I respond in a good way? And can I change? And how has it affected my mind? So that's the practice. And if you have a look at Buddha's teachings, that was what he was all about. So, he had his rainy season retreat where they all went into caves, that's true. But the rest of the time he was out there and he was just answering people's questions. Most of his teachings are that, answering questions from people. But he was always giving practical advice about how they can live their life without harming themselves and others. So that type of practice, we need to be doing it on a daily basis. And if you do that, and if you do meditation, mindfulness, and reflection, those three as a daily practice, then it will be much quicker than Vajrayana if you do it every day. And like you were saying, you said about people, they more monastic, more like a monk. I don't think monks are like that, actually. I think you might be surprised. Monks have the best smartphones now and spend a lot of time in their room chatting on WhatsApp. So you're probably better than the monks anyway.
Yeshe, I wonder if you could comment a little bit on the pandemic. I don't know what it was like in India, but it really did present a lot of folks with a practice opportunity. And it really wound up, from a lot of things that we observed, being a great testimonial to the efficacy of Buddhism. And I know you've been doing did some podcasts and things related to it. I'd just be interested in any things that you took away from the pandemic relative to Buddhism.
Yeah, when the pandemic struck here, of course, I started it off. But when it really, now it's taken off in India. Now we've stopped our lockdown, and now we have over 10,000 new cases every day. I think we're up to over 300,000 cases now. So actually we're in it, though we're out and people are not wearing masks, and there's 1.3 billion people here. Very difficult to socially distance because there's so many people. So at the moment we're still in it. But for me, I started doing the daily meditation online on my Facebook page because I was getting so many messages, so many emails from people where they were scared and anxious and starting to get depressed, and they didn't like their own company. So I think and these people were Buddhists. So I think it clearly shows that they need to put in a little bit more effort, because if you really followed the teachings of Buddha, that would have been a perfect time that you could have coped with that because you're happy with yourself. If you're not happy with yourself, you haven't worked on yourself, you don't understand who you are or why you think or do things, and then you're thrown into that sort of situation, then it's quite, difficult. What I was hoping going through the pandemic, when the lockdown was there, I was hearing many things from people that, I've changed and it's made me change. But I saw towards the end of the lockdown, the government was trying to push everybody to get back to normal and start working and doing exactly what they were doing. And that's unfortunate, because that takes away the opportunity of all the things that we have learned or we could have learned. Now we've come to the end of the lockdown. By September, probably all those things have gone and we'll be back to normal and, the old normal. And it was the old normal that got us into this mess in the first place. So it was a perfect time for people to practice. But I think people had to be at a certain level for that practice to really work for them. And if there was only just, superficially doing Buddhism, then it just wasn't going to help them during that time. You can't just throw people into, solitary confinement and then say, now do a practice. Because if your mind is anxious and fearful about what's going to happen, the worst thing you can do is sit down and meditate when you're scared and you're anxious, because it's just going to make it worse. So I think that if people had reached a certain level in their practice, then this would have been good for them. For other people, I think it was a difficult time for them. And so there are lots of things that we could have learned from it, but I don't know if we have learned from it. I hope. Time will tell. But I know that many teachers came online. We were thrown online. I didn't used to like teaching online because I couldn't see people. When I get invited to go and teach somewhere, I just hope they don't give me a subject and they say, no, just come along and do a teaching. Because then when I see the people, I think, oh, I'll teach this because it seems the right thing to teach when I see the crowd. When you're online, you have to plan it in advance, and I hate all that. I'm much better just not plan things and just talk. So I think for us teachers, it's really shown us the importance of being online and teaching online. And I know for me that at the beginning, I was a little uncomfortable, and now I'm completely relaxed with teaching online. So for me, that's been my major learning curve, is how to teach online and how to get my point across. Like today, this morning, I was teaching online non-self and the 5 aggregates. It's difficult when people are in front of you to get the point across about the non-self. But when they can't talk back to you, then I was trying to think of questions people had asked me in the past and think, okay, yeah, then this might be a question you've got. So for me, that's been my main learning curve. It's how to teach online. But I hope people have been able to slow down and calm down, and when they come out of their full lockdown, that they'll still be calm and peaceful. But I have my doubts.
Yeah, great. Kensel, Marvin, Bob, anything in particular you'd reactions to the discussion or questions?
Hi, I'm Bob.
Hi. Hi, Bob.
I really resonate with your approach to meditation and teaching. I'm a terrible meditator, and yet the contact that I've had with these people, I was introduced to Buddhism maybe 10, 15 years ago by my daughter. And since then, it's been completely transformative, even though I'm still a terrible meditator. And one of my big concerns, especially lately with all the insanity that we see going on around us, is in many ways, my transformation could be characterized as pretty simple, a pretty simple understanding of, for example, that all of my experience is constructed in my head. And so that's all a suspect and needs to be looked at. And the understanding that all of my behavior comes out of millions of years of evolution and thousands of years of culture and an entire life of good and bad experiences. And I just wonder, I mean, when I talk to people I know about Buddhism, they sort of are kind of, what's that? And yet, if we get into a really deep discussion about it, I find that they have the understanding to be able to make sense out of this and to transform their lives, essentially. I'm just wondering, is there some sweet spot between full-on Buddhism in any form and the sort of trivialized mindfulness teaching that we often find in the West?
Mm. So I think, there are a few things to say here. I don't know what you mean by a terrible meditator, because there is no good and bad in meditation. If you're sitting down and all you're doing is sitting down with your eyes closed, then at least you're doing that. So I would say there's no such thing as a terrible meditator. And, we all have bad days. And even after, 45 years of meditating, some days, my mind is just like a washing machine on full spin. So I wouldn't characterize yourself as a bad meditator. We have good and bad days. And also you said about your simple transformation. Well, actually, I don't think that is simple. I think that's the key to the whole thing, about guarding your mind and understanding your mind and understanding what control your mind has over you. We all have these belief systems, but we don't know that when we're being led by these belief systems. So Buddhism gives us this opportunity to see that, okay, this is only a belief and it's taken me in this direction. So I wouldn't say that, what you've done there is simple. So the question was what, sorry?
Can we find some sweet spot between full-on Buddhism and the sort of trivialized mindfulness that we see so often in the West?
So I think that, the new type of mindfulness, it has its place, yeah. So I think that some people will give up and will do meditation and sit down and study and understand and work on their mind. And other people want quick fixes, which is what the new Buddhism is all about, really. So both of them have their place. Sometimes we don't have time to do a full practice, but if you can just do a quick mindful awareness breathing practice just for a couple of minutes, at least we're doing something. At least we're spending a couple of minutes watching our breath, calming ourselves down. If we learn, you know, certain practices like the new mindfulness, they look, use your senses to bring yourself back into the present moment, then great. Because, you know, when you're in the present moment, then you can engage with your mind. So it may be a trivial practice to bring you back to the present moment, but when you're in that present moment, then you can be using what you've learned in Buddhism. So I wouldn't split them. These are trivial and these are serious, because one can lead to the other and one can complement the other. So though it may not be the four foundations of mindfulness these days, it's still very relevant, and it's still about using your breath as an anchor to bring yourself back. And remember, we only have the present moment. So whatever it takes to bring us back into that present moment, it gives us an opportunity to check the mind. Am I just reacting, like you were saying, you know, from past experience in that? Or am I responding? So it may have been mindfulness that brought you there, but when you're there, it could be Buddhism that is going to help you to look at your mind. So I think they both have relevance, and they can both, you know, help each other.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. My real introduction to meditation was John Kabat-Zinn, reading the full catastrophe life or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought, well, where is this going to get us? But over the years, I think it sort of sunk in. And although I call myself a terrible meditator, I do find myself approaching every moment throughout the day with a meditative attitude. And that has been quite transformative.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you see, that's a practice in itself then, isn't it? You know, that you're looking at every experience you have, and every moment is an experience, and we can either skim over the top or we can learn from that experience. So, and I think, you know, that if you can, for me, the point of the beginning of learning meditation and using anapanasati, watching your breath, is to teach your mind, train your mind to focus on one thing. So, and for some people, they can get that in 6 months. Other people, it may take 3 years. But, you know, once you've learned that practice of how to train your mind to sit on just one thing, then you can take that wherever you go. It means you can focus. So you can focus on what is happening. You can focus at work. You can focus on your emotions. But first of all, we have to learn how to sit the mind on one thing. And so anapanasati is fantastic for that, because we've always got the breath wherever we are. We can just sit and watch the breath come in and out. So you can just, I've got 2 minutes, I'm waiting for somebody. Okay, I'll shut my eyes and watch my breath. You're training your mind to sit on one thing. Once you've trained it to sit on one thing, then you can go into vipassana or analytical meditation. For me, I would think that you do the anapanasati until you feel that you can sit on and just watch the breath, and then go into analytical meditation. For me, that's the key, because whatever thought is coming into your head, analyze that. Where is that coming from? What is behind that? You know, is it useful? Do I need to reinforce it? Has it passed its sell-by date? Do I need to let it go? If I want to let it go, what do I put in its place? So by analyzing, doing analytical meditation, you're going to work on your mind. But we need to start with anapanasati. You need to start with the breathing awareness, just to train ourselves and teach ourselves to focus on one thing. When you've got that, then the rest you can meditate on whatever style you want, really. But I'm just saying, for me, if I want to transform my mind, I have to work on my mind. So the direct way of working on your mind is analytical meditation. Just sit, stop watching your breath a moment and just see what keeps coming up. Not trivial things, what, big thing keeps coming up. Okay, this has come up today, so I need to work on it. Then work on it, get to the root of it. That's the way you'll be able to transform your mind. And then you'll be a brilliant meditator.
Thank you. That's really right to the point.
You're welcome.
Marvin, Kensel, any observations?
I have a question, Yeshe. You sort of opened up a controversy that's very important to me. When you described your analytical meditation. That's something I find myself doing a lot. Whenever I'm on the cushion, I'm bothered by something, I go down to the root of it. But there's so many teachers who say that's absolutely the wrong thing to do, that you should never look at the content of your experience. You just find where it is in the body and that's enough. So I'm not sure. I've been feeling guilty about it.
Yeah, you see, for me, find it in your body, but then what are you going to do with it? So I've learned the anger I hold in my chest, say. So, okay, as an early warning system, when my chest starts to get tight, then I think, oh yeah, then anger is coming. So I can either move away or do a breathing exercise. So yeah, I understand the learning where it is in your body, but it isn't getting to the root of it. We need to try to let that anger go. And we're never going to be able to let the anger go if we don't know where it's coming from. If you constantly keep going into the same situation and you keep getting angry, and then you find out where it is in the body, and then the next week you go into the same situation and you get angry again, and then you look to see where it is in your body. What are you learning from that? So for me, the way to do it is analyze it. If those thoughts are constantly coming in your head, or if a situation has arisen where it's brought up strong destructive emotions in you, then you should look at that. Where is it coming from? What is the root of that? Not just, oh yeah, they made me angry. That's not going to help. Or I feel it somewhere in my body. We really need to, for me, I'm not saying the other teachers are wrong, but I'm just saying for me, that the way to deal with it and the way that I've dealt with it is to get to the root of it. And the way to do that is through meditation. I can't see any other way than stopping and doing some anapanasati, calming down, and then working on it and going deep inside of me. That anger came from me. That person did whatever they did, but I had a choice. I didn't have to get angry, but I always get angry. So why is that? So I have to work on that. And I don't see that just looking in your body is going to give you the full answer. It is a good thing to do, but it's not going to clear up your anger. It's not going to help you understand where that come from. Did it come from my pride, or did it come from past experiences? When I was young, somebody shouted at me. What is the reason? When you find the reason, then you can change. But until you find the reason for it, you're just going to keep doing it and doing it. So for me, I think that analytical meditation is the answer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kensel, you've been uncharacteristically quiet this morning. Any observations or comments?
I would just say that the different kinds of distractions and problems we deal with in everyday life should be treated as an opportunity to enrich the practice. You need to be creative about dealing with things. And I want to say that Yeshe's books are excellent and you can follow his instructions and benefit from them.
Thank you.
Great. Well, we're just about at the 1 hour mark, and we really do try to respect people's times and keep to schedules that we set. I have to say, Yeshe, this has just been great. And it's wonderful to have you as part of our community. It just enriches and on a whole bunch of dimensions. And particularly given that you do so much over the internet, you know, we do a lot of virtual retreats. This group is this is a great group to do a virtual retreat with, because we all know the internet, we know how to use it, whatever limitations there are, we work around them. And I would ask that we just continue to keep in touch with one another and look at opportunities where everybody can benefit from the things that you're already doing and the activities that are going on. I think there's a lot of potential here for more transformation on a lot of levels.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I see your posts and I see the different things you're doing, but they never work in with Indian times. You know, some of them are 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't mind getting up early, but then I'll be so sleepy that I don't know what I'll say. So I just can't seem to fit in with a lot of your time.
Yeah.
So I know that somebody was running morning meditations, but I never got that timing right neither. And I did try twice to get in on that group. I will try harder to join in with your groups with, you know, some of the things you do, definitely.
Right.
And I'm really pleased that you have me as part of your group. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, ditto. And, you know, we have folks on 6 different continents. And we do stuff with people in Australia. We do stuff with people in Asia and Europe. And so, you know, this particular session that we did today, we often do this when we have someone, we have another one coming up in a few weeks that we're going to do with someone who's in the UK, because the Tuesday night things obviously don't work very well. But you'll find this is a group that's very flexible on timing. A lot of our events are in the evening, but Sundays around this time, we'll often do things. So, you know, don't take any of those, don't take time as a given. It's much more, we're all about transformation here. And if there's an opportunity that folks really can learn something from and get some benefit from, the timing is very fluid. So please keep that in mind as a flexibility.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I'll try to be a better member, I promise.
Great. Well, on that note, again, thank you again. And we'll look forward to more interactions in the future sometime soon, hopefully.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you all. Namaste.
Take care.
Namaste. Thank you, Yeshe.
Thank you. Namaste.
Okay, bye. Bye.